My name is Carolyn Hill, Carolyn Ebert Hill. I worked at a drugstore, and I knew the other teenager that was working there, and he did too. And he came in to see her and ask her out. And now you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. And she said she couldn't go out because she was working. And so then he asked her where I lived, and I was going by my biological father's last name of Carey. And but in school I was Carolyn Ebert. So he had a little difficulty finding where I lived.
In the phone book first.
Right.
Wasn't any Carries.
Right. There wasn't any Careys in the phone book, and so he had another couple, another girl and a sailor that was home on leave, and they were in the car, and they helped him, I guess, find the street or something, and
They helped her.
oh, right. But anyway, that's how I met him. I was a substitute for the girl that he wanted to take out, and miracles upon miracles. When he joined the Navy, he let me have his FFA jacket from high school. Yes, and that still hangs in the closet.
What was that like, getting the jacket?
Oh, that was like, look at me, I've got this jacket. And when when we got back into class, one of the fellows that played string bass in the orchestra saw the jacket, and he said, well, I can tell you've been busy this summer. So that's how we met him. And we've been together we married in 54, so it's 62 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been David. Well, I decided after I had washed and hung clothes out in the morning, and I had what we called the penny loafer. Mother probably remembers that. And my feet got the red dye off of the penny loafers because the grass was wet, and I wasn't expecting to have a baby that night, so I didn't take a shower because the baby wasn't due for 15 days yet. And I woke him up around midnight and said, I think we better go to the hospital. And he said, why? And I said, because I have a bellyache. Oh, okay. So we drove, and of course it was clear across Washington, D.C. We went to Bethesda Naval, and he broke every speed limit going through town, never saw a police car, one. And
red lights too.
right. And when I got in the hospital, a nurse took me away in a wheelchair and told him to go sign me in. And then I was taken back and put on a stretcher, and she timed my contractions, and she said, is this your first baby? And I said, yes. When is he due? And I said, not for 2 weeks. And she said, I think I'm going to send you home. And I thought, heck, all that money spent on gas to come over here on a false run. And so about that time I had another contraction. She said, maybe I'll check you. And I thought, oh, good idea. This is my first one. I don't really know what's happening. And so she checked, and she said, oh, you're crowning. I said, oh. So she called the doctor, and the doctor came before the baby did. And I think my total hours were 5 hours. Not bad for the first baby. And we took him home in, 4 days? 5 days, because he was the first one. The ones that had more than one, they only stayed 4 days. And I thought that was kind of wrong, because they had babies or children at home, and they really could have used another day in the hospital to get their rest. But the Navy didn't look at it that way. Yeah, in fact, Michael was our first one. And he's 4 days, no, his birthday is April 4th, and David's is April 27th. And one time, one lady asked, wasn't long after we moved to Dryden, his birthday is in April, and his is in April, and there's less than 4 weeks. How did you do that? I really thought it wasn't any of her business. And I said, we had some outside help. And we did. He was a foster child, so we had outside help. And I didn't explain it any farther than that, because I didn't feel it was any of her, like I said, any of her business. And we've had a few girls. And the girls are always harder than the boys. Always, always. Roseanne, that's right. She was a pretty girl. She was the second daughter, and she felt apparently unloved. Her parents loved her sister and her sister's baby more than they loved her. So she wanted to have a baby, so like her sister did, so her parents would love her like they did her sister and her baby. And the social worker placed her in our house, where we had 6 boys. I was a little nervous, to say the least, but no, everything was fine. And she did end up leaving us and going someplace else, and she did end up having a baby. So, and the first girl that we ever had was one that had lived at the state home. She was not quite, she had some learning disabilities. And at that time, if you were a ward of the state and you had a child out of wedlock, you were automatically sterilized. And she was, when she was 13 or 14. I thought that was rather harsh, but that's what Michigan did back then. And the problem was that, and when my sister Vic came to live with us, she would try very, very hard to stay at that level that Vic did, because she wanted to be like her. But when she left us, she would go home and then come back for for the weekend. She would go home, and she would say, when she got back, she would say, "I think I saw my baby." And I said, "Why? What do you mean?" She said, "Because I saw a lady pushing a baby, and I asked her how old the baby was, and she said that baby could have been mine, and I think it was." And I thought, oh boy, she's going to go all through her life looking for this baby. The state of Michigan didn't do enough for her, really, in that. But that's the way it was back then.